The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, Earth time. It came through the deep space relay that humanity had only learned to use 6 months ago, and it was addressed to every government on the planet at once. The Galactic Council, in its infinite wisdom, had decided that humanity was ready for the next step. Hiram read the message 3 times before she believed it. She was sitting in her small office in the United Earth Embassy, a building that still smelled like fresh paint because humanity had only been part of the galactic community for 2 years. The message was simple. Every new species that joined the council was required to participate in something called the Proving Grounds. It was a military tournament. Species sent their best warriors to fight in structured battles on a massive artificial planet built just for this purpose. The results determined a species' military rank, which affected everything from trade deals to territory rights. Hiram leaned back in her chair and let out a long breath. She had spent her career as a diplomat, talking her way through problems. But this was not a problem she could talk through. The council wanted soldiers. She made the call that same afternoon. Within a week, a man named Tejo was standing in her office. He was not tall. He was not wide. He had a calm face and quiet eyes, and he stood with the kind of stillness that came from years of learning how to wait. He was a fleet commander, one of the best Earth had ever produced, and he had fought in 3 wars before his 30th birthday. Hiram explained the situation. Tejo listened without interrupting. When she finished, he asked only one question. How many people can I bring? The answer was 50. Tejo nodded and left the room. Within 2 days, he had his team. He picked people he trusted, people he had bled with, people who understood that war was not about glory. It was about coming home. His second in command was Yuna. She was a tactician, the kind of person who could look at a battlefield and see it the way a chess master sees a board. She was small and sharp, and she never raised her voice, because she never needed to. When Yuna spoke, people listened, because what she said was always right. His ground commander was Jisoo. She was a Marine captain who had earned every scar on her body the hard way. She was tough in the way that only people who have been broken and put themselves back together can be tough. She did not talk much, but when the fighting started, she was always the first one moving and the last one to stop. His engineer was Do-won. He was the kind of man who could build a weapon out of a broken chair and a handful of screws. He thought in systems and angles and pressure points, and he had a gift for turning nothing into something dangerous. He smiled a lot for a man who built things designed to kill. His medic was Subin. She was quiet and steady, and she had hands that never shook, not even when the world was falling apart around her. She had pulled soldiers out of rubble, stitched wounds in the dark, and kept hearts beating when every odd said they should stop. She believed that every life was worth saving, even the enemies, and she had never once been wrong about that. Together, the 5 of them boarded a transport ship and left Earth behind. The journey to the Proving Grounds took 3 weeks. During that time, Tejo studied. He pulled every piece of footage he could find from previous tournaments. He watched how the other species fought. He learned their formations, their weapons, their habits. And the more he watched, the more a small smile grew on his face. The Valori were the reigning champions. They were insectoid creatures, tall and covered in natural armor, with bladed limbs that could cut through steel. They moved like dancers and killed like machines. They had won the last 12 cycles of the Proving Grounds, and no one in the galaxy seriously believed they could be beaten. The Urani were mercenaries, big, reptilian, covered in thick scales. They fought with brute force and plasma-edged blades, and they were very, very good at hurting things. They were expected to place second, as they always did. The Palom ran the council. They were soft, gelatinous creatures who had no military of their own, but controlled the political machinery of the galaxy. They watched and judged and decided who mattered. And then there were the humans. Small, soft, short-lived. No claws, no armor, no venom, no wings. On paper, they were the weakest species in the tournament by a wide margin. When the human team arrived at the Proving Ground station, the other delegations barely looked at them. A group of Irani warriors laughed openly as the humans walked past. One of them made a comment about how easy the first round would be. Jisoo kept walking. Dowan kept walking. Subin kept walking. Yuna glanced at Taeho, who had not changed expression at all. The opening ceremony was held in a massive arena, carved into the surface of the artificial planet. Thousands of spectators from dozens of species filled the stands. Holographic displays showed the brackets. The humans were seated last. Dead last. The Palom speaker, a wobbling mass of translucent flesh, welcomed all participants and wished them honor in battle. Taeho stood with his team at the far end of the arena floor. They were the smallest group there. Every other species had warriors that towered over them, bristled with natural weapons, or glowed with bioluminescent threat displays. The humans just stood there, in their plain gray uniforms, looking around with calm, steady eyes. Yuna leaned close to Taeho. They have no idea what's coming, do they? Taeho watched the Valori delegation across the arena. Their bladed limbs caught the light as they moved. They were beautiful and terrifying, and they had never known defeat. No, Taeho said quietly. They think this is a sport. They've never fought something that treats war like a religion. Yuna nodded. Around them, the galaxy buzzed with excitement and casual dismissal. The humans were a curiosity, a footnote, a warm-up round for the real contenders. None of them knew what was about to happen. None of them understood what Earth had built, not out of choice, but out of 10,000 years of necessity. Humanity had not come to the stars because they were peaceful. They had come because they had survived enough violence to earn the right to try. And now the galaxy had invited them to fight. Taeho looked up at the stars, visible through the arena's open ceiling, took a slow breath, and got to work. The battlefield was a flat stretch of rocky ground, about 2 kilometers wide, scattered with broken walls, shallow trenches, and chunks of metal debris. It had been designed to give neither side an advantage. The council's drones floated high above, recording everything for the billions of viewers watching across the galaxy. This was entertainment. This was tradition. And for most species, this was the moment they proved what they were made of. The humans were matched against the Irani in the first round. It was supposed to be a quick fight. The bookmakers across the galaxy had the Irani winning in under 10 minutes. The odds against the humans were so high that most betting houses did not even bother listing them. The Irani were impressive. 20 of them stood in a loose line on their side of the field, each one standing nearly 3 meters tall. Their scales were dark green, thick enough to stop most projectile weapons, and their plasma-edged blades hummed with a low, hungry sound. They rolled their massive shoulders and grinned with mouths full of teeth. They had done this before. They knew how it went. You charged, you hit, you won. On the other side, 20 humans stood quietly. They wore light tactical armor, carried standard rifles and sidearms, and had small packs strapped to their backs. Compared to the Irani, they looked like children standing next to giants. The signal sounded. The match began. The Irani roared and charged. It was what they always did. Their heavy feet shook the ground as they ran forward in a thundering line, blades raised, eyes locked on the small gray figures ahead of them. The humans turned around and ran. The audience made a sound of confusion. Some laughed. The Irani laughed too, running faster now, sensing easy prey. In the proving grounds, running was the same as giving up. No species had ever retreated in the opening seconds of a match. It was considered the deepest form of weakness. But Jisoo was not running because she was afraid. She was running because Taeho had told her exactly where to go. The humans fell back 300 meters in less than a minute. They split into 4 groups and vanished behind walls and into trenches. The Urani followed, still laughing, still confident. They spread out to chase the scattered humans. That was their first mistake. Do-won had been awake for the entire night before the match. While the rest of the team slept, he had studied the battlefield layout that the council provided to all participants. He memorized every wall, every trench, every pile of debris, and in the 30 minutes the teams were given to prepare before the signal, he had turned the human side of the field into a death trap. The first group of Urani ran between 2 broken walls, and the ground beneath them exploded. Dohan had packed the gaps with improvised charges built from the battlefield's own debris and materials from the supply packs. 3 Urani went down instantly, their thick scales cracked open by the force of the blasts. The second group tried to flank around a low ridge and walked into a crossfire. Yuna had positioned 2 fire teams with overlapping fields of vision. The humans opened fire from 2 directions at once. The Urani scales could stop a single shot, but not a concentrated volley from multiple angles. 2 more went down. The rest stumbled back, confused. This was not how the proving grounds worked. Species were supposed to meet in the middle and fight. Strength against strength. The humans were not doing that. They were hiding. They were tricking. They were fighting dirty. The Urani regrouped and pushed forward again, this time more carefully. But careful was not their strength. They were built for charging, for overwhelming, for breaking things. Slow and cautious made them targets. Jisoo led a squad of 5 around the Urani's left side while they were focused on the front. They came out of a trench behind the Urani line and hit them from the back. At the same time, Yuna called in fire from the front. The Urani were caught between 2 forces, and for the first time in the match, they felt something unfamiliar. It was panic. One Urani warrior turned and swung his massive blade at Jisoo. She ducked under it, moved inside his reach where the blade was useless, and put 3 rounds into the gap between his neck scales. She was already moving to the next one before he hit the ground. In the stands, the audience had stopped laughing. The Palom officials leaned forward in their seats. The holographic displays showed the human team moving with a coordination that none of them had ever seen. Every human knew where every other human was. They communicated constantly, short, sharp words, hand signals, clicks, and whistles. They covered each other's movements. When one reloaded, another fired. When one advanced, another watched their back. They were not 20 individuals. They were one thing with 20 bodies. The Urani could not adapt. They were warriors, each one a powerful fighter on their own, but they fought alone, even when they stood together. They had no plan for an enemy that refused to stand still, refused to fight fair, and refused to stop moving. In 14 minutes it was over. 12 Urani were down with injuries. The remaining 8 threw down their weapons and surrendered. On the human side, 2 soldiers had minor wounds. Subin treated them in under a minute. Then Subin did something that made the entire arena go quiet. She walked across the field to where the wounded Urani lay, knelt beside the nearest one, and began treating his injuries. She cleaned his wounds, applied field dressings to the cracks in his scales, and checked his breathing. The Urani stared at her with wide, confused eyes. No species had ever helped a defeated enemy in the proving grounds. You fought, you won, and you left the losers where they fell. That was tradition. Subin did not care about tradition. She cared about the bleeding creature in front of her, so she helped him. When she was done with the first one, she moved to the second. The arena was completely silent. Thousands of aliens from dozens of species watched a small human woman kneel in the dirt and bandage the wounds of the enemy she had just helped destroy. They did not understand it. Mercy after violence, kindness after destruction. It did not fit into any framework they knew. Up in the observation deck, a Valori officer named Kuroth played the footage back. He watched the humans retreat, watched them set their traps, watched them coordinate their fire, watched them close in from behind. He watched Jisoo duck under a blade meant to cut her in half, and put the Irani down without hesitation. He watched Subin kneel in the dirt and save the lives she had just helped end. Kuroth had fought in 8 cycles of the Proving Grounds. He had killed more enemies than he could remember. He had never lost a single match. He watched the footage one more time, and deep inside his armored chest, in a place he did not know existed, something cold settled in. He had no word for it in his language. The humans would have called it dread. He turned off the display and sat in silence for a long time. Word spread quickly through the Proving Ground station. The humans had beaten the Orani. Not just beaten them, humiliated them. Taken them apart like a machine being disassembled by a careful mechanic. And they had done it without losing a single soldier. Some species called it luck. Some called it trickery. The Orani called it dishonor. But none of that mattered, because the tournament moved on, and the humans moved with it. The second round matched them against the Threll, a hive mind species that fought as a swarm. Each individual Threll was small, about the size of a human child, with 4 arms and sharp claws. Alone, they were nothing special. But they were never alone. They shared one mind, one consciousness, spread across hundreds of bodies. When the swarm moved, it moved perfectly. Every body knowing exactly what every other body was doing. No delays, no miscommunication, no hesitation. They had crushed larger and stronger species with sheer coordination. Yuna studied the Threll footage for 6 hours before the match. She watched the way the swarm flowed, the way it reacted, the way it pulled back and pushed forward like a single living wave. And she found the weakness. The Threll were coordinated because they were connected. Every command flowed through signal nodes. Special Threll individuals buried deep in the swarm, who acted like relay towers, passing thoughts from the central mind to the outer bodies. Kill the nodes, kill the coordination. The match began, and the Threll swarm poured across the field like water. Hundreds of small bodies moving in perfect unity. It was beautiful to watch. It was also terrifying. Yuna did not panic. She had identified 3 signal nodes in the first minute by watching which Threll the others moved around, like planets orbiting hidden stars. She directed 3 separate teams to take them out simultaneously. The shots were precise. 3 nodes fell in the span of 2 seconds. The swarm shattered. Hundreds of Threll stumbled, froze, ran in circles. Without the nodes, they were just individual creatures, confused and afraid, with no idea what to do. The humans moved through them quickly and carefully, disabling but not killing. And within 20 minutes, the swarm had collapsed. The central mind surrendered. In the stands, the Palom officials did not speak for a long time after that match. The third round was against the Kavoth, a species built like walking tanks. They were massive, nearly 4 meters tall, covered in bony plates so thick that standard weapons bounced off them. They were slow, but almost impossible to hurt. Every species that had faced them had broken against their armor, like waves against a cliff. Dowan looked at the Kavoth and saw a problem. Then he looked at the battlefield and saw a solution. During the preparation period, he built siege weapons, not from advanced technology, from wreckage. He pulled apart pieces of the battlefield itself, broken walls, metal beams, chunks of stone, and assembled them into crude but powerful devices. Catapults, rams, focused explosive charges shaped to direct their force into a single point. The Kavoth marched forward, confident in their armor. Dohan's first charge hit the lead Kavoth in the knee joint, where the bony plates met. The crack echoed across the entire arena. The Kavath stumbled and fell. The second charge hit another in the same spot. Then, a third. The Kavath had never faced an enemy that studied their armor and attacked the gaps. They had never needed to protect their weak points, because no species had ever looked for them. Dohan had looked. Dohan always looked. The match lasted 30 minutes. The Kavath withdrew, limping. Their unbreakable confidence cracked along with their armor. It was after the fourth round that things changed. The humans faced a species called the Shen, quick and agile predators with reflexes twice as fast as any human. They were faster, and everyone knew it. The Shen scored the first real hit on a human in the entire tournament. A Shen warrior caught Jisoo across the side with a slashing claw, tearing through her armor and into the flesh beneath. Jisoo went down. The audience leaned forward. The Shen warrior moved in for the finish. Jisoo got back up. Blood was running down her side and soaking into her uniform. Her face was white with pain. She pressed one hand against the wound and raised her weapon with the other. The Shen warrior hesitated. In its experience, when a creature took a wound like that, it stayed down. That was what bodies did. They broke, and they stopped. She fired twice, dropped the Shen warrior, and kept moving. Subin reached her 2 minutes later and patched the wound in the field, while Jisoo kept giving orders to her squad. Subin worked fast and clean, stitching and sealing, while explosions sounded around them. She did not flinch. Neither did Jisoo. The arena was silent again. The aliens watched a wounded human fight through pain that would have stopped most species cold. They watched another human run through an active combat zone to keep her alive. And they watched both of them keep going, like nothing had happened. That night, Taeho introduced a new element. He had the humans broadcast music across the battlefield during the 5th round. Human war music, drums and horns, and deep rumbling voices singing in languages that no alien understood. It filled the arena and echoed off the walls. It made something old and cold rise up in the spines of every species listening. They did not know why it frightened them. They just knew that it did. The humans also began leaving signs. After each victory, they arranged the debris of the battlefield into patterns, symbols, warnings. It meant nothing in any alien language, but the message was clear. We were here. We won. We are coming for you next. By the 6th round, species were withdrawing from the tournament rather than face the humans. 2 delegations packed their ships and left the station entirely. The Palom Council held an emergency meeting to discuss whether the humans should be disqualified on the grounds that their tactics were outside the spirit of the proving grounds. The motion failed, but only by 2 votes. In the diplomatic gallery, Hiram sat among ambassadors who no longer looked at her with amusement. They looked at her with something much more honest. An ambassador from a species she did not recognize leaned over and asked, very quietly, "How many wars has your species fought?" She thought about the thousands of years of human history, the endless cycle of conflict and recovery and conflict again. She thought about the trenches and the beaches and the cities reduced to ash and the people who rebuilt them every single time. All of them, she said. The ambassador did not ask any more questions. That night, the final bracket was announced. The humans would face the Valori, the undefeated champions, the greatest warriors the galaxy had ever known. Taeho sat alone in his quarters and opened a file on his datapad. It was titled Earth Military History, Full Archive. It contained every battle, every war, every strategy, and every lesson humanity had ever learned in 10,000 years of organized violence. He had uploaded it to the Galactic Network for his team to access. The file was the largest single document the network had ever processed. It took the system 4 minutes to index it. A Palum technician saw the file size and thought it was an error. It was not. Tejo read for 3 hours, then closed the file and went to sleep. He slept well. He always slept well before a fight. The arena was full. Every seat was taken. Every screen in the galaxy was tuned to the proving grounds. Ships had stopped in open space so their crews could watch. Trading floors had gone quiet. Council chambers had paused their sessions. The entire galaxy held its breath for one reason. Humans versus Valori, the final match. The battlefield for the final was different from the others. It was larger, nearly 5 kilometers across, with varied terrain. Rocky hills on one side, open ground in the middle, a network of ravines and broken structures on the other. The council had designed it to test everything: strength, speed, tactics, endurance, and the will to keep going when the body said stop. The Valori stood on the eastern edge, 25 of them, tall and gleaming, their exoskeletons catching the light like polished metal. Their bladed forelimbs were extended, each one as long as a human sword and sharper than anything humans could manufacture. Their compound eyes reflected the world in 1,000 angles at once. They saw in every spectrum, from infrared to ultraviolet. Nothing was hidden from them. Their commander, Kurath, stood at the front. He had won 8 consecutive cycles. He had killed more opponents in the proving grounds than any living warrior. He was considered by every measure the galaxy had to be the most dangerous individual in the known universe. He stared across the field at the humans, and the cold feeling in his chest had not gone away. It had grown. On the western edge, Tejo stood with his team. 25 humans in gray tactical armor. They carried rifles, sidearms, grenades, entrenching tools, medical kits, and the contents of Dohan's pack, which nobody had been allowed to inspect. They looked small. They looked fragile. They looked exactly like what they were. Soft creatures from a mid-sized planet with no natural weapons and no business being here. The signal sounded. The Valori deployed their legendary crescent formation. It was a thing of beauty. The warriors spread into a wide, curving line that swept forward like a closing jaw. The tips of the crescent moved faster than the center, designed to wrap around the enemy and crush them from 3 sides at once. Every species that had faced it had been swallowed whole. It was the perfect formation. Tejo did not try to counter it with a single strategy. He used 5. He split the humans into 5 units, each with a different role. Jisoo led the infantry, the fighters who would meet the Valori head-on and hold them in place. Doan led the engineers, who immediately began reshaping the terrain. Yuna commanded the fire support teams, positioned on the rocky hills with long-range weapons. Subin set up a mobile medical station behind the front line. And Tejo himself moved between all of them, coordinating, adjusting, seeing the whole picture while everyone else saw their part. The Valori had never faced combined arms warfare. They had never seen an enemy that fought with infantry, engineering, fire support, medical, and command all operating simultaneously as parts of one machine. They expected one strategy, one formation, one approach. They got a system. Dohan made the first move. While the Valori crescent swept forward, he detonated charges he had buried in the terrain during the preparation period. A section of the ground between the center and the right tip of the crescent collapsed into a trench 4 meters deep and 30 meters long. The Valori line was cut in 2. Before they could react, Jisoo led her squad into the gap. They poured into the space between the separated Valori groups and attacked the exposed flanks of both. The Valori on the right tip tried to turn inward, but found themselves under fire from Yuna's teams on the hills. The Valori in the center tried to push through the trench, but Dohan had lined it with obstacles and traps. Kurath recognized what was happening. He was not a fool. He adjusted, pulling his warriors back into a tighter formation, sacrificing the crescent to consolidate his force. It was the right move. It was what any great commander would have done. Taeho had expected it. The consolidation pulled the Valori into a cluster, which made them a target. Yuna concentrated fire on the cluster, not to destroy them, but to force them to keep their heads down. While they were pinned, Jisoo circled around with a flanking squad. The Valori saw her coming. They saw everything with those compound eyes, but they could not respond, because moving meant exposing themselves to Yuna's fire. The battle settled into something long and brutal. The Valori were too tough to break quickly. Their armor turned most shots, and their blades were devastating at close range. 2 humans went down in the first hour. Subin dragged both of them back to the medical station under fire, patched their wounds, and had one of them back in the fight within 20 minutes. The other had a broken leg. Subin set it, gave him painkillers, and he continued to fire from a prone position behind cover. The Valori watched this with something beyond confusion. In their culture, a wounded warrior was left behind. The fight moved on. Resources were not wasted on the fallen. But the humans wasted everything on their fallen. They ran into fire to pull their people back. They spent precious time and supplies to keep broken bodies fighting. And somehow, impossibly, it worked. The humans never lost a single fighter permanently because they refused to let anyone go. 2 hours in, Kurath changed tactics again. He identified Taeho as the command element and sent his 3 fastest warriors to kill him. They were incredibly fast. They crossed 200 meters of open ground in seconds, blades extended, eyes locked on the human commander. Taeho saw them coming. He did not run. He dropped to one knee, raised his rifle, and put 2 rounds into the lead warrior's leg joint. The warrior stumbled. The second warrior leaped over the first, and Jisoo hit it from the side with a flying tackle that should not have worked against a creature twice her size, but she hit the joint where the leg met the body, and the Valori went down. The third warrior reached Taeho and swung its blade. Taeho leaned back. The blade missed his throat by the width of a finger. He fired 3 times at point-blank range into the warrior's underbelly, the one spot where the exoskeleton was thinnest. The warrior dropped. 3 hours, the longest final in Proving Grounds history. Both sides were exhausted, but the Valori were breaking. Not physically, mentally. They had never fought this long. They had never faced an enemy that adapted to every move, countered every strategy, and simply refused to stop no matter how much damage they took. Yuna saw the moment. She saw the slight hesitation in the Valori line, the tiny delay between Kurath's orders and his warrior's response. She told Taeho. Taeho launched the final push. Every human moved at once. Jisoo from the front. Dohan detonated the last of his charges on the left. Yuna's fire teams laid down everything they had. The humans closed in from 3 directions, not to kill, but to surround, to make the Valori understand that it was over. Kurath fought until he was the last one standing. He fought beautifully, his blade singing, his body twisting with a grace that made the audience weep. But Taeho was there, and Jisoo was there, and Yuna was directing fire that kept every escape route closed. Kurath took a round in the shoulder, then another in the leg. He fell to one knee. And then he did something that had never happened in the history of the Proving Grounds. He lowered his blades, bowed his head, and surrendered. The arena was silent, completely, absolutely silent. The Valori had never lost. Their commander had never kneeled. The galaxy had never seen this, and it did not know what to do. Then Taeho walked forward, extended his hand, and helped Kurath to his feet. Jisoo and the others did the same for every fallen Valori warrior. They lifted them up, supported the wounded, and saluted them with a gesture of respect that crossed every language barrier in the galaxy. The Palom speaker watched from his observation chamber. his gelatinous body trembling with something he could not name. He whispered to his aide, and his voice was very small. "What have we invited into our galaxy?" The emergency session of the Galactic Council was called within 6 hours of the final match. Every ambassador was required to attend. No exceptions, no delays. The great circular chamber, built to hold representatives from over 400 species, was completely full for the first time in living memory. The air was thick with the chemical signals, pheromones, and electromagnetic pulses that different species use to communicate emotion. If a human had been able to read all of them at once, they would have detected a single, overwhelming feeling shared by every species in the room: fear. The Palom speaker took his place at the central podium. His gelatinous body rippled with agitation, changing colors and patterns that his species used to express deep distress. He called the session to order and announced the reason for the emergency meeting: the matter of humanity's participation in the proving grounds. It was a small seat, near the back, assigned to them because they were a new and minor species. She wore a simple dark suit and her face was calm. She had been a diplomat her entire life. She knew how to sit in a room full of frightened people and not make things worse. The speaker called her forward. She stood and walked to the podium, passing rows of alien ambassadors, who watched her the way prey animals watch a shadow moving through tall grass. She was a small woman. She weighed perhaps 60 kilograms. She had no claws, no armor, no venom, and every single creature in that room was afraid of her. The speaker asked her to explain, not the tournament, not the tactics. He asked her to explain humanity. Hiram took a slow breath and began. She talked about Earth. She described a world where everything was trying to kill you. The weather, the animals, the diseases. She described a species that had climbed to the top of the food chain, not because they were the strongest or the fastest, but because they were the most stubborn things the planet had ever produced. They could not outrun a predator, so they learned to chase it until it collapsed from exhaustion. They could not survive the cold, so they stole fire from the sky and carried it with them. They could not fight with claws, so they picked up rocks and sharpened sticks, and never, ever put them down. Then she talked about the wars. She did not dramatize them. She did not make them sound glorious. She listed them the way a doctor lists symptoms: matter-of-fact, clinical, honest. She talked about the ancient wars fought with bronze and iron. She talked about the wars fought with gunpowder and steel. She talked about the trenches, where humans sat in mud for years and died by the millions and kept fighting anyway. She talked about the bombs, the ones that could erase a city in a single flash of light. She told them that humanity had built those bombs, used them, survived them, and then built more. She talked about the soldiers who fought with missing limbs, the medics who crawled through fire to reach the wounded, the pilots who flew burning aircraft into enemy targets because the mission mattered more than their lives, the prisoners who endured years of torture and never broke, the civilians who rebuilt destroyed cities with their bare hands, again and again and again, because giving up was not something humans knew how to do. When she finished, the chamber was silent. Several ambassadors had left their seats. A few had activated their personal shields. One species delegation was crying, though they were not sure why. Then Kurath spoke. The Valori commander had been given special permission to address the council. He stood at the podium, his wounded shoulder still bandaged with human medical supplies, and he spoke in a voice that had commanded armies. He said that in 12 cycles, he had defeated every species the galaxy had sent against him. He had fought creatures twice his size, 3 times his speed, 10 times his number. He had never been seriously challenged until the humans. He said that the humans did not fight like any species he had ever encountered. Other species had one way of fighting, one doctrine, one approach. The humans had all of them. They changed tactics mid-battle. They adapted in real time. They used their terrain, their tools, their enemies' weaknesses, and each other. When one strategy failed, they invented a new one on the spot. It was like fighting water. You could not hold it, could not pin it down, could not predict where it would flow next. But that, Koroth said, was not the most frightening thing about humans. The most frightening thing was what happened after the battle ended. The humans had won. They had defeated the greatest warriors in the galaxy. They had earned the right to stand over their enemies and claim victory. Instead, they knelt down and helped the Valori to their feet. They treated Valori wounds with their own medical supplies. They saluted warriors who had been trying to kill them minutes earlier. Koroth said he had searched his entire vocabulary for a word that described what the humans had done. Mercy was the closest translation, but it was not quite right. Mercy implied superiority. What the humans showed was something else. It was respect. Genuine, unconditional respect for a defeated enemy. And that, Koroth said, looking directly at the council, was why the humans were the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Because they could destroy you completely, and then make you grateful to have fought them. There was no defense against that. There was no strategy to counter it. You could not fight an enemy that made you love them. The chamber was quiet for a long time after Koroth sat down. The Palom speaker called for a vote. The motion was simple. Human participation in the proving grounds would be permanently banned, not as a punishment, not as a disqualification, as a safety measure for every other species in the galaxy. The vote was unanimous. 412 species, 412 votes in favor, not a single objection. Teho received the news on the observation deck of the station. He was standing with Yuna, Jisoo, Dohan, and Subin, looking out at the stars. Hiram delivered the message personally. Yuna laughed. It was a real laugh, warm and bright. "They outlawed us," she said, shaking her head. "They actually outlawed us." Jisoo shrugged. Her wound was healing well. She touched the bandage absently and said nothing. Dohan was already sketching something on his datapad. When Subin looked over his shoulder, she saw it was a new design for an improved field charge. She shook her head and smiled. Hiram told them that the council had done one more thing. They had created a new military rank, the highest in galactic history. It was not earned through the tournament. It was granted by special decree. The rank was called Exempt. It meant that humanity's military capability was considered so far beyond the scale of the proving grounds that it could not be measured by the tournament's standards. It was, in the most polite language the galaxy could manage, an admission that the humans were in a category of their own. Teho accepted the rank with a small nod. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. He looked out at the stars, billions of them, scattered across the darkness like sparks from an ancient fire, and he thought about Earth. He thought about the long, bloody road that had brought humanity to this moment. Every war, every loss, every time they had been knocked down and gotten back up. Every time they had chosen to rebuild instead of surrender. Hiram stood beside him. "I told the council something," she said quietly. "I told them we didn't come to the stars to make war. We came because we survived enough of it to earn the right to reach for peace. But if peace ever needs defending, we'll be ready." Teho nodded slowly. Behind them, Yuna was teaching Jisoo a card game. Dohan was arguing with Subin about the best way to set a broken bone in zero gravity. They sounded like friends. They sounded like family. They sounded like exactly what they were. Ordinary people from an ordinary world who had done extraordinary things because that was simply what humans did. Teho looked at the stars one last time and said it quietly, almost to himself, so softly that only Hiram heard. "We didn't win because we're the strongest. We won because we never learned how to quit." Hiram smiled. Somewhere out in the darkness, the galaxy was still watching, still afraid, still amazed. And somewhere on a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable star, 7 billion humans went about their lives, completely unaware that the entire universe had just agreed on one simple truth. You do not fight the humans. You thank the stars, they would rather be your friends.